Troubled households, neglected kids, and parenting choices that shocked even Hollywood insiders. These stories prove that fame can buy luxury, but not the wisdom to raise a child. Behind the scenes, some of Hollywood's brightest stars were failing in their most important role, being a parent. Some were cold and distant, others were reckless, controlling, or completely absent. Their children didn't grow up with movie magic. They grew up in the shadows of scandal, neglect, and emotional wounds that never fully healed. These are the stars whose legacy wasn't just in film reels, but in the damage they left behind. Here are 19 vintage Hollywood stars with the worst parenting and the disturbing stories behind the scenes. Judy Garland. Judy Garland was one of the most beloved stars of classic Hollywood, but behind her success was a childhood filled with pressure and control. From the time she was a toddler, her mother pushed her into performing. She was just 3 years old when she began singing in her family's vaudeville act. By the time she was 9, her mother was giving her pills to keep her awake and help her sleep, setting the stage for a lifelong struggle with addiction. When Garland signed with MGM as a teenager, studio executives were harsh about her appearance. They told her she was too fat and put her on strict diets of coffee and soup, while giving her amphetamines to stay thin and energized. Long working hours and little rest left her physically and emotionally drained. Judy later said that she never had a real childhood. Her life was controlled by adults who cared more about money and fame than her well-being. Over time, the damage caught up to her. She became dependent on pills to function and suffered from depression. Despite all her talent and success, Garland died at just 47 from a drug overdose. Her story is one of brilliance overshadowed by early pain. Shirley Temple. Shirley Temple was a major star at a very young age. By the time she was 6, she had become America's sweetheart, known for her curls and cheerful songs during the Great Depression. But her early rise to fame came with a hidden cost. Her mother carefully managed her every move, making sure Shirley always performed perfectly on camera. In her own memoir, Temple shared how working conditions were strict and sometimes scary. Children who acted out were placed in punishment boxes. She also told a disturbing story about a meeting with an MGM producer when she was just 11 years old. He made inappropriate comments about her appearance and exposed himself, leaving her confused and upset. Even though Shirley remained positive in the public eye, she faced many challenges as a child star. She worked long hours with little rest and was often surrounded by adults who put profits above protection. Later in life, she moved away from acting and went on to become a diplomat. Shirley Temple's story shows how fame can steal a childhood. Her success did not protect her from the pressure and dangers of early stardom, which left lasting memories that she never fully forgot. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe is remembered as one of Hollywood's most famous and glamorous stars, but her early life was full of heartbreak. Born as Norma Jean, she never had a stable home. Her mother, Gladys, had serious mental health problems and could not care for her. Marilyn was placed in foster care just 2 weeks after she was born. Over the years, she moved through different foster homes and even stayed in an orphanage. Her childhood was full of confusion and fear. At one point, her mother tried to carry her away in a suitcase, an event Marilyn later remembered with sadness. Gladys was eventually admitted to a mental hospital, leaving Marilyn without proper care or guidance. She often said she felt alone and unwanted growing up. These early experiences left a deep mark on her. As an adult, she often searched for love and security, but found herself in unhealthy relationships. She also struggled with anxiety and turned to pills and alcohol for comfort. The charming image she showed to the world hid years of emotional pain. Marilyn Monroe's childhood gave her little sense of safety or self-worth, and this pain followed her until her tragic death at age 36. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge was a talented and beautiful performer who broke barriers for Black women in film. But before her success, she endured a very difficult childhood. She was raised by her mother, Ruby, and Ruby's partner, a strict woman named Eloise, who the children called Auntie Ma Ma. Together, they turned Dorothy and her sister into a traveling act called the Wonder Children. The girls performed in churches and theaters, but behind the curtain, life was hard. Eloise was physically and emotionally abusive, often using harsh discipline to keep the girls in line. Dorothy later described her early years as full of sadness and fear. She did not get to enjoy the freedom and joy most children experience. Even as she became famous, Dorothy struggled with the scars from her past. She had trouble trusting people and suffered from low self-esteem. The pressures of being a black woman in a racist industry made things worse. She faced rejection, unequal pay, and loneliness. Over time, she turned to alcohol and pills to cope. Dorothy died at the age of 42. Her life story is one of strength and talent, but also of pain caused by a harsh and controlling upbringing. Jackie Kugan. Jackie Kugan was one of the first child stars in Hollywood history. He became famous after starring with Charlie Chaplin in the film The Kid when he was just 7 years old. His sweet face made him a favorite with audiences, and he quickly earned millions of dollars. But his success came with a cost. His parents controlled his career and finances, and when he grew older, he found out most of his money was gone. After his father died, Jackie's mother and stepfather spent his earnings on luxury items like cars and jewelry. When Jackie turned 21, he asked for his money and was shocked to learn it had nearly all been used up. He took them to court, and his story made headlines across the country. Many people were angry to see how badly he had been treated. Because of his case, a new law was created in California. The Kugan law requires that part of a child actor's earnings be saved in a trust. Jackie's experience helped protect future generations of young performers. Though he continued to act later in life, Jackie never fully recovered from the betrayal. His childhood showed how fame can be misused by the people closest to you. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was one of the first children to become a star through Disney. He played leading roles in several hit films, including Treasure Island, and voiced Peter Pan. He was praised for his natural acting and sweet appearance. But behind the fame, Bobby's life took a very sad turn. As he got older, Disney decided he was no longer right for their brand. He was dropped from the studio while still a teenager, leaving him without direction. His parents, who had once managed his early career, failed to help him transition out of acting. Bobby struggled to find roles and began to feel isolated and forgotten. Without a strong support system, he turned to drugs and was arrested multiple times. His appearance changed, and he became unrecognizable. By his early 30s, Bobby was living on the streets. He died alone in an abandoned building and was buried in an unmarked grave. His body wasn't identified until a year later. Bobby's life is a heartbreaking example of how early fame and weak parental guidance can lead to tragedy. Even though he once brought joy to millions, he spent his final years in silence and sorrow. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney was one of the biggest stars of the 1930s and 1940s. He began acting at a very young age and quickly became a household name. People loved his charm and energy on screen, but behind the scenes, Mickey's life was not so happy. His parents had been performers, and they pushed him into show business early. Mickey later wrote that he never had a real childhood. He was working full-time while other kids were playing and going to school. In his autobiography, Rooney shared that his parents took control of his earnings and spent most of his money. He worked constantly but saw little of the wealth he created. He described feeling like a product instead of a person, used by adults who were supposed to protect him. His mother managed his every move, and Mickey admitted that even as a teenager, he had no real say in his life. As an adult, Rooney struggled with marriages, gambling, and addiction. Despite a long career, he often battled feelings of loneliness. He used his own story to warn others about the dangers of child fame. His experience helped bring attention to the need for stronger protections for young actors. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor became a star before she was even a teenager. Her beauty and talent made her one of the most famous actresses in the world. But much of her early career was controlled by her parents, especially her mother, Sarah. Sarah Taylor was a former actress who had big dreams for her daughter. From a young age, Elizabeth was groomed to be perfect in every way. She was always told how to speak, how to walk, and even how to feel in public. Elizabeth later said that she didn't choose acting, it was chosen for her. Her parents moved the family to Los Angeles, mainly so she could work in film. As her fame grew, her childhood became more and more limited. She spent long days on film sets, with little time for school or friends. Although Elizabeth achieved incredible success, she often spoke about the pressure she felt growing up. Her early relationships were shaped by the need to please others. She married 8 times and struggled with health problems and addiction. Her childhood, shaped by adult ambition, took away her sense of freedom. While she became a legend, it came at the cost of a normal, carefree youth. Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood was born into a family that saw fame as a way to escape hardship. Her mother, Maria, was determined to make Natalie a star. From a very early age, Maria took her to auditions and controlled every part of her life. Natalie was acting in movies before she could read. She was taught to lie about her age and was pushed into adult situations while still a child. Natalie's mother was strict and demanding. She made Natalie take on roles that she didn't want, even ones that made her uncomfortable. Maria was also known for being superstitious and controlling. According to her biography, Maria once broke a butterfly's wings in front of Natalie to make her cry for a movie scene. Even as Natalie became a successful adult actress, she found it difficult to break free from her mother's influence. She suffered from anxiety and had a deep fear of water, possibly linked to trauma from her early life. Natalie's personal life was often unstable. Her tragic and mysterious death at 43 brought even more attention to her troubled past. Her story shows how strong parenting pressure can shape, and sometimes harm, a child's future. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow was one of the first true screen goddesses of Hollywood. Her blonde hair and bold personality made her a symbol of beauty and strength. But behind the camera, her life was controlled by her mother, also named Jean, who was often called Mother Jean. Her mother wanted to be a star herself, but never made it. Instead, she lived through her daughter's fame. From the beginning, Mother Jean was involved in every part of Harlow's life. She made career choices, managed her money, and even controlled her personal relationships. Jean Harlow had very little say in her own path. She later admitted that she never felt free to make her own choices. As Harlow's fame grew, so did the stress. She suffered from health issues and emotional pain, but was expected to keep performing. Her relationships were troubled, and she never had the chance to live a normal, relaxed life. She died at just 26 from kidney failure. Many believe the pressure and lack of personal freedom contributed to her early death. Jean Harlow's story is a sad example of what happens when parents see their children as a second chance at their own dreams. Peg Antwistle. Peg Antwistle is best known today for her tragic death rather than her acting. In 1932, she jumped off the H in the Hollywood sign and became a symbol of lost dreams. But few people know how difficult her early life really was. Peg's mother died when she was young, and her father later passed away in a street accident. After that, she was raised by relatives who offered little warmth or emotional care. Growing up without close family support, Peg found comfort in acting. She became known on the New York stage and later moved to Los Angeles to try her luck in film. But Hollywood didn't welcome her easily. She struggled to find roles and felt invisible in an industry that often overlooked newcomers. Without steady work or strong family connections, Peg began to feel hopeless. Just 24 years old, she left a note and ended her life in a moment of deep sadness. Her story is often seen as an example of how rejection and isolation in Hollywood can be too much to handle. Peg Antwistle's early losses and lack of support shaped a life that ended far too soon. Diana Barrymore. Diana Barrymore was born into one of America's most famous acting families, but fame didn't protect her from emotional pain. Her father, John Barrymore, was a brilliant actor but also a heavy drinker. He was rarely around during her childhood, and when he was, his behavior could be unpredictable and frightening. Diana's mother remarried and focused on her own social life, leaving Diana to feel unwanted and alone. Without steady love or structure, Diana grew up feeling lost. She followed her family's path into acting, but success came with pressure. She felt compared to her father, and that made her anxious. She also struggled with drinking and drug use, habits that started early and grew worse over time. In her autobiography, Too Much, Too Soon, Diana described her life honestly. She talked about how her parents' actions shaped her problems. Despite moments of success, she could never fully escape the sadness that followed her from childhood. Diana died at age 38 after years of personal struggle. Her story reminds us that even those born into fame can suffer deeply when their early years lack love, guidance, and emotional care. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer was a talented actress known for her intense screen presence, but her private life was filled with emotional pain. From a young age, her relationship with her mother was rocky. Frances often felt criticized and controlled, especially as she grew into adulthood. Her mother made many decisions for her, including placing her in psychiatric hospitals when Frances started showing signs of emotional stress. Frances never got the support she needed during these hard times. Instead of care, she received treatments that were harsh and outdated. These included long stays in mental hospitals, electroshock therapy, and even reports of physical abuse while institutionalized. Much of this was done with her mother's approval or involvement. Even after she was released and tried to rebuild her life, Frances found it hard to trust people. her mental health issues remained, and she never fully returned to her former success. She died in 1970, still carrying the weight of her past. Frances Farmer's story is a powerful example of how emotional control and forced treatment can break a person's spirit. She needed compassion, but what she got was fear and silence. Patty Duke. Patty Duke became famous as a teenager, but behind her smiling face was a history of emotional abuse. Her early life was shaped by John and Ethel Ross, her talent managers. They took over her care when she was very young and presented themselves as helpful and supportive. In truth, they were controlling and cruel. Patty later said they gave her pills to keep her working and manipulated her into saying and doing things that weren't true. Patty lived under constant pressure. The Rosses changed her name and built a fake life around her. They kept her away from her real family and made her depend completely on them. She was often overworked and confused, and she began to suffer from serious mental health problems that continued into adulthood. Later in life, Patty was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She openly discussed her struggles in her book, Call Me Anna, and became an advocate for mental health. She explained how her childhood shaped many of her challenges. Even though she achieved great success, Patty Duke's early years were filled with pain, confusion, and a loss of control. Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball was one of the most successful comedians in television history, but her early life was far from easy. Her father died when she was very young, and her mother had to leave for work in another city to support the family. Lucille was sent to live with her strict grandparents, who were not very affectionate or warm. She often felt lonely and out of place, especially without her mother nearby. As a child, Lucille had a strong desire to perform and make people laugh, but she didn't have much support or encouragement. Her family didn't think a career in show business was realistic. When she did try to follow her dream, she faced many rejections, but she kept pushing forward. Lucille later talked about how these early experiences helped her become strong and independent. Even so, she always remembered how hard it was to grow up feeling unwanted and misunderstood. Her tough start in life gave her the drive to succeed, but it also left emotional marks. Susan Peters. Susan Peters had a promising career in the 1940s and was even nominated for an Academy Award, but her early life was filled with sadness. Her father died when she was young, and the family struggled with money. Susan had to grow up quickly, often helping take care of her younger siblings. Her childhood was shaped by loss and the feeling of needing to be strong for others. As she entered Hollywood, Susan was hopeful about the future, but a tragic accident changed everything. During a hunting trip, a gun misfired and the bullet hit her spine. She was paralyzed from the waist down. This happened when she was only 23, just as her career was rising. Susan tried to stay strong, even returning to acting from a wheelchair, but her early hardships and the trauma from the accident became too much. Her marriage fell apart, and she withdrew from public life. Susan died at just 31, with many believing that she gave up on life. Salmano. Salmano became famous in his teens and was best known for his emotional role in Rebel Without a Cause. He came from a working-class Italian family in the Bronx. From a young age, Sal felt pressure to succeed and help support his family. His parents were strict and expected a lot from him. He often felt alone with his thoughts and fears, especially as he struggled to understand his identity. Sal's early rise to fame brought him money and attention, but it also brought stress. He was not always allowed to express who he really was. As he got older, he came out as gay at a time when it was risky to do so, especially in Hollywood. He had a hard time finding roles and was often judged for things outside of his control. In his biography, people close to Sal shared how lonely and misunderstood he felt, even at the height of his fame. His childhood and family pressure made it hard for him to feel safe or accepted. Salmano died violently at the age of 37. His life was full of talent and promise, but also shaped by fear, pressure, and the pain of hiding who he truly was. Lana Turner. Lana Turner's glamorous image hit a difficult start. She was born to poor parents, and her father was murdered when she was just 9. After that, her mother moved them to Los Angeles, hoping for a better life. Lana's childhood was full of financial struggle and instability. Her mother worked long hours, and Lana spent much of her time alone or with neighbors. At age 15, she was discovered in a soda shop and began her film career. From that moment on, her life was shaped by the demands of the studio system. She was told how to dress, what to say, and who to befriend. Her early loss and lack of steady family support left her vulnerable to being controlled by others. As she grew older, Lana found herself in dramatic relationships and surrounded by scandal. Her daughter, Cheryl Crane, later wrote about how her mother's childhood trauma shaped her choices and emotional life. Lana's beauty made her a star, but her early pain followed her throughout her career. Her story reminds us that even the most polished public image can come from a place of deep personal loss and struggle. Jane Withers. Jane Withers was one of the most successful child stars of the 1930s. While she had a cheerful and funny image on screen, her life behind the scenes was far from lighthearted. Her mother, Lavinia, was deeply involved in her career. She controlled Jane's schedule, appearance, and behavior, often treating her more like a project than a daughter. Jane started performing at age 3 and began appearing in films soon after. Her days were tightly packed with rehearsals, lessons, and publicity events. There was little room for a normal childhood. According to child actor turned historian Diana Sarah Carey, Jane's mother was strict and demanding, focused only on keeping her daughter successful. Although Jane remained in the spotlight for years, the emotional impact of growing up without freedom left its mark. As she got older, she stepped away from Hollywood and tried to build a life on her own terms. She eventually found peace, but her early years were shaped by pressure and performance. Jane's experience is another reminder that childhood fame often comes at a cost. Even smiling stars can carry quiet struggles, especially when their lives are managed by ambitious adults from the very beginning. Thanks for watching. If these shocking family secrets from old Hollywood left you stunned, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell for more untold stories from the golden era. Know of another star whose parenting was far from picture perfect? Let us know in the comments. We're always listening. Until next time, keep the truth in focus and the legends in perspective.